Oh boy, comic boom has started with Dark Knight Nation.
We have begun. We have begun, and it is appropriate that we are starting off talking about the tree. Hi everybody. It's Comic Boom here, and I'm here with my co-host Dark Knight Nation. We every week, well, it seems to be every week, although we don't. It might not be every week, but it just happens to be most of the time. We try to do this weekly. We pick a topic and we talk about it. We take turns hosting. And this week we decided to talk about the Trinity. The Trinity meaning specifically Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, and what's going on in the DC universe, particularly with respect to, well, I suppose to a wider degree, what they're going through, and in the context of heroes in crisis, and try to narrow it down to those three, that at the very least, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, and maybe to a certain extent, their family. There's stuff going on with Wonder Woman through Witching Hour, through Batman, Batman's former sidekick, Robin, now Nightwing. He's going through something right now. Rick Grayson. There's definitely a lot to talk about. Superman, of course, finally getting some action from Lois Lane, despite her betrayal. So seems to be making the news. So Dark Knight Nation, my friend, why don't you say hi and tell everyone your pick of the week?
Hi. Well, I'm Dark Knight Nation. Hello. I guess my pick of the week, it might be that what if Thor was born as a frost giant? It just sounds like a lot of fun. Like that's really the only reasoning to it. Like I feel like usually my pull of the weeks feel very same. It's like event book, something else that's hyped up, Batman related. It's like I feel like it was time for something new. So I don't know. I was going through like the Marvel solicits, because sometimes if I have a little bit of extra money, I'll be like, oh, like can I pick up something else, something a little bit different? And I just saw the what if Thor was a frost giant, and it just seems like a shit ton of fun. So
I think that is an excellent choice. I mean, I remember fondly the what ifs back in the 80s, the early 80s. The what ifs of Marvel were awesome. I love the Elseworlds. DC came out with their Elseworlds tales, and it's no coincidence that some of the best, most beloved DC tales were classics, are like Superman Red Sun, and Gotham by Gaslight, are all basically Elseworlds tales. And what if, I mean, what if Gwen Stacy had lived for Spider-Man was one of my favorites growing up from Marvel, and with Marvel bringing them back, and that's part of the whole Marvel thing with their, I think CB Cebulski, I think he wants to bring back some of that old Marvel feel, and Thor with the Frost Giants. That, I never picked that up, but maybe I won't pick it up because I do collect Jason Aaron's Thor, and I know you're a Thor fan as well, so it's definitely probably worth something checking out.
Yeah, it wasn't like, I don't think I went into this week like, oh well, like this is it, and then I don't know. I was looking up comics and I was like, this just looks like a lot of fun. Like it looks like such a freaking palate cleanser. And I've heard about like the revamp of all the Marvel what if stories, and it just sounds like a fun idea. I haven't gotten to read it yet, unfortunately, but I'm really, really excited to break into that book.
Yeah. My pick of the week, well, I'm going to say a tie. I'm going to cheat a little bit. First, I'm going to say it's Action Comics 1004, but we're going to talk about Superman, so I'm not going to focus on that. But actually, what's that?
I said, oh boy.
Yeah, Action Comics 1004. I really enjoyed. I love how it simultaneously annoyed me and sort of got me excited all at the same time. That was, not too many comics can do that. Yeah. So that was fun. But the other one that's just a hidden gem, it's called The Wrong Earth, and it's by Ahoy Comics, and this is issue 2, but I'm sure issue 1's at your store. So and it's about a Dragonfly, a hero called Dragonfly. He's called Dragonfly on one Earth, and then on an alternate Earth, he's called Dragonfly Man. And it's sort of like the difference between Adam West Batman and like the Dark Knight Batman. One's really goody two shoes and really, and one's very dark and gritty and uses lethal force. And they end up switching places, switching Earths, and it's them trying to adjust to each other's Earths, and they're having a very difficult time of it. and it's really good. It's funny, but it's also played for a little bit serious too. It's really good stuff, and I highly recommend The Wrong Earth by Ahoy Comics.
Sounds like a good time. I feel like in one of our previous live streams you had brought up the first issue. I don't think this is the first time we've spoken about it.
It's not. I did bring up the first issue last time, but this one's even better than the first issue. It's pretty good.
It might be something to check out.
Yeah, for sure. So, all right. Well, we're talking the Trinity here, and DC's really rocking the boat. They came out with Rebirth. All this. I mean, wow, how times have changed. I mean, just about a year ago, we were all filled with hope, and we're DC's really headed in a great direction. Wally West was back after Rebirth. He's hugging Barry Allen, and now, of course, we all know the fate of Wally West now. Go ahead.
No, oh boy, Wally. Not gonna spoil anything, but just know, oh boy, Wally.
Yeah, and in a very real way, here's the irony: is that Wally West is dead, and it's all the Trinity's fault. The Trinity is to blame in many ways, because they've created Sanctuary, with Superman, basically the Sanctuary exists. It looks like it exists on it looks like a farm in Kansas. It's run by a couple robots that look like Jonathan and Martha Kent. It's got terrible security, obviously. Wonder Woman's compassion maybe might funnel through it. And Batman, Bruce Wayne's money might finance it. But the bottom line is it never worked. So even the Trinity seems to not be doing a particularly good job in terms of protecting and healing other heroes. Meanwhile, they got some crises going on in their own life. And so let's deal with them one at a time so we can get right to it. And why don't we start with Batman, Dark Knight. So tell me, in your opinion, the current state of Batman.
Oh, boy. So Batman, I mean, I don't think it's too far to say that the current Batman stories are kind of the consequence of the wedding, really. The current mental state of the Caped Crusader is really surrounded around the fact that, spoilers for those of you who don't know, Selena Kyle left them at the altar. And we've kind of been sitting on this hanging plot thread about this cabal led by Bane that's been kind of behind all of Batman's misfortune. As of recent, one recent misfortune to be named was, again, spoiler, Dick Grayson got shot in the head by the KG Beast. And he's off kind of doing his own thing, which I'm sure we'll get into later. But largely, Bruce Wayne has not taken it well. If you've watched any number of me and Boom talking, we go on about at length at questioning how nobody realizes that Bruce Wayne just blasted a urinal to shreds in the bathroom of a public restaurant, and he's not doing so hot. Not to mention his first son got shot. So it's not looking to be, like Boom had alluded to before, it's not looking to be a very positive time for the Trinity. For me, yeah, so there we go. We got little Richie over there.
Yeah, little Richie. Yeah, little Richie. It's wrapped in a bag, but it's a Nightwing 50, and I think this issue has sold very well. I think a lot of retailers are. I think a lot of retailers are happy. I don't know how different readers might feel about Dick turning into a Rick, but I think retailers are happy. How did this sell at your shop, Dark Knight?
I have no idea. I haven't picked up my physical copy yet.
Oh my! You better hurry up and get there.
Well, I have them in a pull box. They're kind of aware that, like, for those of you who don't know, I don't live very close to my old shop anymore, but I continue patronage there. So I'll go to pick up my books anywhere between 2 to 4 weeks. And sometimes, like, if they have a digital code, I mean, they know I'll pay them, and they're really good about it. So they'll literally peel off my digital code and give it to me so that I can read. They're cool guys, but they know, like, I spend more money on comic books than I do on my utilities every month. So I think I've earned a level of trust. But I imagine it's sold pretty well. It's hard to say. It's been a huge public commotion, over the internet, which is usually a pretty big indicator of how something's selling. So
Yeah.
I can imagine it did fairly well for a Nightwing book, at least.
Well, you talked about Batman, and it's interesting when we talk about his current state of mind. Tom King continues to write him in many readers' eyes. A lot of readers, they come to the conclusion that Tom King is humanizing Batman, which I don't actually see. I wouldn't call it humanizing more than just he's still just sort of grunting and groaning and everything else. The latest issue when he confronts KG Beast, that entire issue is him just basically grunting and walking 300 kilometers to KG Beast, and then walking 300 kilometers in the sleet and snow. It's what I find fascinating about Batman is that Tom King wants to humanize Batman, but at the same time he elevates him to Superman status. I mean, if Batman's mind is compromised like that, and he's having such a difficult time dealing with Selina's loss, it doesn't seem to be affecting him physically. I mean, if he can walk 300 kilometers through sleet and snow in Siberia, both ways. I mean, literally, it's hard to imagine. It doesn't appear to be that he's that physically compromised, and And then, not to mention, in the pages of Justice League, every bone in his body was broken, right? Or, I mean, both his arms and legs were broken by Lex Luthor. He's literally in a body cast in Justice League, albeit a very sophisticated, technologically advanced body cast.
Yeah.
But, he's physically, the continuity with Batman, he's got, his bones are broken in Justice League. He's going through psychological turmoil over a heartache in the pages of Batman. He is, and Nightwing, his son, is, recovering from a trauma of being shot in the head. I tell you, let me ask you this, Dark Knight. How are you enjoying it? Do you think it's been handled well by DC? Do you think the stories, do they flow for you? Do they work?
I for the Trinity as a whole, or just Batman?
Or Batman?
It feels really non-cohesive. I mean, I feel like it forever will be, because Batman's one of those characters that has 3 or 4 books rolling at a time. We have Batman by Tom King, which you would think would be cohesive, but it's kind of not, even though it's written by the same guy. You get very different tones, which can, in some way be valuable, but here I don't think it is. It's a little bit confusing. Not in the sense that I can't follow the plot. That's fine enough. I think it's just confusing on like where Tom King wants to set these stories emotionally for me. And then you have Detective, who is kind of hopping around writers until we get to Peter Tomasi. And he's, to me, is probably going to be the second coming. Back on Batman, I'll probably be more excited again to read Detective than I am for Batman. And then I think it's either somewhere between November and January, we're getting Batman and the Outsiders by a friend of my channel, Brian Edward Hill, and Dexter Soy, which I'm excited about. I think he did a solid job on Detective. And but to me, like, as cool as it is to see all these Batmans, and then we're getting, I think this week it came out, the Batman Secret Files or whatever, where it's going to be like these series of like little one-off stories by different writers and artists.
I didn't know that.
I mean, I will largely write off the Secret Files thing. It's not trying to be something really grounded in what's going on in the contemporary DC universe. So, I'll let that slide. But there's so much different stuff going on, and I feel like there are too many feet in the pool. You know what I mean? There's too many people kind of picking at Batman right now, and I feel like it'll always be a problem. But when there's really, like, it feels like a different Batman in every book. And then again, like you said, including in Justice League, Scott Snyder's Batman's totally different right now than Tom King's Batman. Tom King's Batman is totally different from the 2, 3, 4 people that are going to be writing him in Detective until Tomasi gets on.
Yeah.
It just feels weird. And I think even within Tom King's own Batman run, there's a lot of there's a lot of disparity between the different ways he's writing them. 1 second, Batman barely talks, and it's just monosyllabic sentences. And then the next second, he's, reiterating full dialogue to somebody. The next second, it's, like a down in the dumps sad boy Batman. The next second, it's an incredibly determined Batman who will go to great lengths to save his son. It's just, I know these characters are multifaceted, and that's what I love about them. But there's just too much going on, and like I said, even within Tom King's Batman run, I enjoyed the last story for the most part. You know what I mean? It wasn't amazing, it wasn't bad. The art was kick ass, that I'll give it. But
I think I would agree with you that that they're trying to reconcile all the Batman appearances between Detective, Batman, and Justice League. Trying to reconcile all those appearances, not to mention his Batman's always routinely guest starring in other random DC hero comic books. Trying to reconcile all that continuity-wise can be difficult and can definitely give one a headache. Although I will say, though, that I think that even I'll admit, and I'm a fairly big continuity buff. I've actually DC, I think, has done a good job since Rebirth of almost training me like a dog. They throw me a bone every now and then. I'm sort of trained. I almost think of Justice League as a completely separate adventure, even continuity-wise. And because, like you said, you really can't. They don't line up. I mean, they just don't line up. I mean, you can't convince me that Batman went from walking a combined 600 kilometers through sleet and snow, and then did that after healing with all his bones broken in Justice League. I mean, obviously that doesn't really jive and line up. And even there's, like you said, there's obviously with comic books, when it comes to continuity, you always got to suspend your belief a bit. But let me ask you this: in fairness to the writers, in fairness to Scott Snyder, in fairness to Tom King, in fairness to the current writer of Detective Comics, who is James Robinson, current writer. Looking at the stories in isolation from each other, how do you view Batman's portrayal in Justice League versus Batman versus Detective? Do you have a preference? Do you have a hierarchy? Rank them from 1 to 3.
Oh boy. Largely, I'm probably gonna say Detective. I think Detective, like if we're looking at it since the beginning of Rebirth, I think James Tynion did a really great job with Batman, although Batman was kind of really shared the stage. And then you got onto Brian Edward Hill, and James Robinson's doing an okay job. It feels like the same character. They're doing different things and they're exploring different parts of him, but it feels like the same Batman. I'm going to go out here and say I don't like the way Scott Snyder's writing Batman in Justice League. And it's not because Batman doesn't have a main role in the book. I feel like whenever I say that, a lot of people are like, you're just mad because you're a Batman fan and he's not at the center of the table. No, I don't care. I do not care about that. What I do care about, though, is finding some level of consistency with a character. And for me, like, it's just Batman cracking one-liners in Justice League. That's literally all he is, and kind of being a bit of a jackass. And while I'm okay with a bit of jackassery in my bat suit, it's not the whole character to me. Tom King is really, really inconsistent. It 1 second, like I said, 1 second monosyllabic Batman, next second it's poetic Batman, next second it's grunting, and then followed by that he's forcing cucumber sandwiches down Dick Grayson's throat. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's Tom King's Batman's very hit or miss. So like I don't even know where to put it. It's either great or it's either really not for me. So it's hard for me to ground it anywhere besides, some midway point. I think that Detective's up there for me right now. Yeah. And Justice League's Batman and Tom King's Batman are around the same level. They're two totally separate Batman, but I don't love the way they're being portrayed. But what about you? What are your thoughts on?
Well, I mean, you make my job easier. I agree 100% with your ranking. I got to go with Detective, and you know what? I feel James Robinson. I actually am enjoying James Robinson's Detective run. I think it's actually pretty good, and I feel kind of bad because I was pretty hard on James Robinson in the pages of Wonder Woman. I was pretty hard on his writing.
You're not alone on that. A lot of people were.
Yeah, and I say that in fairness to him because I think it had some high points when he was writing Wonder Woman, but I really like his detective. He's done a really good job here, and yet I'm always reviewing Tom King Batman, and I'm not reviewing James Robinson Detective. And I'm gonna give him his due because he deserves some credit there because I was he's a good writer, and but you can't hit it out of the park all the time. So, but no, I agree with you. And so Detective is just. Detective always seems to be more of a self-contained story. It just seems to have a little bit more shoot spot and substance. Batman is always, for some reason, when a writer is assigned to Batman, they always want to leave their mark. And they're always, to their credit, they're always trying to do something a little bit avant-garde and really, really make a huge difference. Sometimes that's a bad thing. Sometimes that's a good thing. With Tom King, obviously he's very popular. He seems to be working with most people. And, but you made a very good point when you talked about Tom King's Batman, and it's very true that he's very inconsistent with his writing of Batman. His Batman's characterizations, which, well, I would describe it as I don't find that. I was trying to figure out because I've always a lot of people that are loving Tom King's run are saying that, oh, I love how he humanizes Batman. He humanizes Batman. I find the exact opposite. I don't find that he's humanizing Batman at all. I find that because Batman is just basically grunting all the time. What he's doing is that he's putting Batman in normal human situations, but that's not the same as humanizing a character.
Agreed.
You can take Batman out of the bat suit, Bruce, and make him Bruce Wayne, and you can put him on a double date with Lois Lane and Clark Kent. But that's not necessarily humanizing him. That's just putting him on a double date with 3 other human beings. Like my idea, or at least as a reader, I have a higher standard of what I consider humanizing. I want to learn something about Bruce Wayne. I want to, because even on the double date issues that everyone loved, and I loved them too, he didn't really reveal much about himself. I mean, the most he ever revealed about himself was maybe when in the War of Jokes and Riddles, he really opened up to Selina about a secret of his past. And, that was a little bit of humanizing there, I thought. But beyond that, there's a lot of grunting. And like you said, there's a lot of, and with him ripping the urinal off the wall in jury duty, that showed some anger and emotion. I kind of enjoyed that. He's getting upset. I mean, at least there is some semblance of human emotion there that I can wrap my head around. But I just want to make one quick point here, and that is that I picked up the Batman and Catwoman wedding album. It's the hardcover, beautiful hardcover. And what I find is I have a better respect for what Tom King's trying to do because is that he reprints the 2 issue or 3 issues that are linked. In order to better appreciate what he was trying to do with the wedding, you actually have to read. You should be reading the engagement in Batman issue 24, the dress issue 44, and then of course the big day issue 50. Now, why do I say that? Well, when you read those issues of 24, 44, and 50, then you can the one issue he's talking to Gotham Girl about how he wants to be happy, but he can't be happy because he's Batman. And then the engagement and then the wedding issue, you could see when they spell it out for you and you read those particular issues in order, you almost think they should be one after the other, but they're not. They're separated by 20 issues. Like there's issue 24 followed by 44 followed by issue 50 in this, and this reads really well in one sitting. I loved reading it. But what I find as a criticism to Tom King is because he's got a 100 issue run or 103 issue run, he's putting these little revelations too far apart.
Agreed.
Like, you know what I mean? They got to be more cohesive. It's not obvious the threads that he's linking. Like not everyone's like you and I, and even you and I miss it from time to time, and we're avid Batman readers, and it shouldn't be that way. We shouldn't have to work as hard as we are to figure out what he's writing.
It's not mapped out very well. I 100% agree with you because, there's like, okay, there's this theme, and like reading it at the time, I'm like, okay, this is going to be important, but like, excuse my French, but like, fuck it. When it happened, you know, when you get the result of that 2 years later, how the hell am I supposed to remember that? Not only am I reading Batman or the Batman title, I'm reading 3 other books with Batman in it, but also 2 freaking years go by of this same book. It's like, without going too far down the Tom King Batman rant, I don't think he'll ever write an issue better than Batman #1.
Yeah.
I don't think he will ever write a better Batman issue than he did right there. I'll argue it till the day I die. And it was a great issue. It's not to be said that like things like it's not to be said that it was a moderately decent issue and he can just never write a good Batman book. That's untrue. That was a freaking phenomenal issue. And nothing he's written in Batman has ever gotten close to showing that he fundamentally understands the character without proceeding to fuck it all up, to be quite blatant. Because, you know, you get these moments, for example, in The Wedding, I've talked about at great length. My favorite scene in the book was his moment with Alfred, right? Yeah. It's like, you get it. You totally get it. This is like, you got his relationship with Alfred, and how, you know, Alfred, even though Alfred perceives Bruce as this incredibly cut off human being, Bruce feels that he's always kind of elicited the same, or he's always kind of responded with the proper amount of emotion towards Alfred. It should be so incredibly obvious that he wants Alfred to be the one there for his wedding. And then on the other hand, you have one of the smartest characters in the DC universe resting his entire secret identity and his marriage to Selena Kyle on an alcoholic judge.
Yeah.
In the same book. This isn't like different. This is the same comic book. The same issue.
No, I
like you need to have a more centralized focus. And my biggest issue with DC right now is their lack of editorial, I think. Because the reason for me, I think that DC Rebirth as a whole, and again, this ties into the Trinity and Batman in particular, because there's always 5, 6, 7 different Batman books, including the Bat family. There was this sense of continuity, and the editors were like, no, like, this can't happen because this is happening, or like, this doesn't make sense because this happened in someone else's book. So therefore, like, if you do that, it's going to be, you know, insanity. And now I feel like they have these superstar writers that they're afraid to say no to. And now that Tom King's made a name for himself, and I will say, I think Tom King's Batman has been incredibly divisive. Incredibly divisive. I have never more than in the last 2 years come this close to dropping Batman. Yeah. I've come this close to dropping Batman at least 2 or 3 times now. But then he'll write something that I enjoy. And
it's very interesting because Tom King, I mean, to give him credit where credit's due, he has really ultimately he's sold more. He actually surpassed Scott Snyder in terms of the longest run with consecutive issues selling over 100,000 issues each. And I think he's at a couple where he's under that now, but it has sold very, very well. And so credit where credit is due. And I don't think I agree with you on the continuity because I'm a continuity buff. Mm-hmm. I think it's important, but I think we're going to lose out on that because DC, you know, look, they have a compelling argument. You know, if it isn't broken, why fix it? And you know, with all the different titles out there that have Batman in them, I think it's very hard for them to, and they don't like having to put in that work. And I don't think the writers enjoy having to struggle to coordinate all their creative efforts with each other in order to make it work. And then the irony, Dark Knight, is that if, you know, listening to Scott Snyder on his YouTube channel, listening to Tom King in interviews, listening to Joel Jones in an interview, listening to Jeff Johns, all of them, and those are just off the top of my head, they're all saying the same thing, and that they're apparently they are coordinating their efforts, or at least they think they are. They think they are, but they're clearly not. Not to anyone who's actually reading the comic books, which, you know, again, you know, I mean, it's kind of a nitpick in a way. I mean, I can easily enjoy Justice League and pretend that Tom King's Batman takes place, in a totally different timeline. It's not a big deal to me. But if every now and then Snyder will reference something in Justice League that's going on in Tom King's Batman, and then I almost wish that, to me, it's like, either do or don't, because the moment you try to reference something, well, then you are trying to place your timeline into another comic book. But if it doesn't work, then, you can't suck and blow at the same time. But that's what they always keep trying to do.
Yeah. See, here's the thing. I would totally be fine and forego the notion of a more strict continuity between the Bat titles if they were all good. Back in the New 52, for example, what was going on in Scott Snyder's Batman was totally separate from what was going on in Jeff Johns' Justice League. You know who didn't care? Me. You want to know why? They were both great. They both tackled this character from different ends, but it was still Batman. It still felt like Batman. And that's why I think DC's having an issue again, because they have all these superstar writers now that they're afraid to say no to. And they're forgetting the thing that made DC reboots, dare I say, so successful, in the fact that you had more editorial control. And I know to some people that's taboo, right? They're like, oh, this should be put in the hands of the creatives. I hate to tell you, but some of the best creatives in comic books were editors. Mark Waid, one of the greatest hands-down writers in American comic books, was an editor. Brian Augustyn, an editor. A personal favorite writer of mine, Peter Tomasi, was an editor.
Yeah.
You know why? A lot of these people are fans of the books that are editing these books. And I'm not saying, again, this isn't putting I'm not putting the sanctity of the DC universe solely in the hands of editors. Don't get me wrong, because they can screw up just as much as any creative team can. But there needs to be more of a compromise. You need to learn to say no. And eventually I'll probably get into that conversation when we get into Superman. But, it's Tom King is Tom King. Learn to say no. Like you doubted Scott Snyder up until Metal. And I feel like Scott Snyder proved himself more than Tom King did. So if you got to give him some pushback, give him some pushback, because it's tough, because we speak with our dollar. And I hate to say it, as the guy that's always like, if you don't like a book, drop it. I get a little bit hypocritical when it comes to Batman. I don't want to drop Batman. It's Batman. But I have Batman tattoos. I don't want to stop reading Batman, even if I don't love it. But I've come close so many times. I've known a number of people that have come close or have completely dropped Batman just because it's just so inconsistent.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't even think there needs to be much more said about that. I agree. I will add that probably maybe in the long run, in the future, when we have in the future, if some future comic book reader picks up a trade paperback of a Tom King run, it might be easy. It's not going to be too linked with other comic books. So in that respect, it might read better, or it might, it won't be as, you don't have to worry about buying other comic books. And so maybe that's what they're going for. But but no, there's no question. It's going to be interesting to see at the end how Tom King's story, if everything wraps up. I've got some serious doubts that it will. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt, but so far, based on the first 58 issues, I just got there's too many misfires, and there's so many dangling little subplots that he doesn't even bother to go back to address because he thinks he's addressed them, or he'll talk about them in an interview and he thinks that it's been resolved or somehow we should have figured that out. And I don't know, but whatever. It is what it is. So do you have any other comments on that, or on Batman?
No, I mean, all I'll say is that, for me, I spoke a lot about, being centered somewhere in continuity. It doesn't need to be to the degree that it was in DC Rebirth. For me, I loved Batman in the New 52. Detective was consistent. Batman was consistent. And it was simple things to the fact that, for example, when Damian died, that was echoed throughout all the Bat books. When Dick Grayson was quote unquote killed, right, and became an agent of Spiral, that was somewhat echoed even in Batman. He just stopped showing up in Batman. Simple things like that, just to show that these creators are being mindful of the landscape that they're building and they're being mindful of other creators, is enough for me. And for those of you, I'm going to give this a huge freaking plug right now. I think it's December. Like, pick up Detective Comics when Peter Tomasi comes on. Like, as a hardcore Batman fan, and as someone who read his Batman and Robin, and pretty much everything he's written, at least in the last 5 to 6 to maybe even 7 years, this guy knows these characters, and I think he really understands Batman. So if you guys are looking to get into a Batman book, or maybe looking to get back into Batman, pick up Detective Comics when Tomasi comes on. I want to say it's going to be like $9.90. God, is he coming on before or after 1,000? Right before 1,000, yeah, like $9.93 or something like that.
Yeah, because we're at $9.89 right now.
Yeah, he's coming on within the next like 2 months or so. And if you guys aren't picking it up, man, I'd hop on for Tomasi. I can't recommend picking up his Detective Comics enough.
Yeah, no, I agreed. I'll ask people in the chat if they're watching. If anyone has a favorite Trinity storyline involving Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman, let us know what you think it is. And continuing on, so we talk a lot about Batman. So let's talk about Superman next. And,
oh boy.
I will. I just did. I was before this. I'll start talking first, Dark Knight, on this. Last night I posted a review of Action Comics issue 1004 with Lois Lane finally returning, or pardon me, finally, the conversation between Lois Lane and Clark, basically where she's, I was expecting an apology. After all, she had, in fact, for the last 3 weeks, been hiding away. And while Superman's going through all the stuff that's going on in the DC universe, Earth's in the Phantom Zone, fighting the totality, putting the moon back together in Justice League. I mean, he's fighting the Red Mist, then he's fighting, and then he's fighting Rogol Zar. I mean, this guy's going, and meanwhile he's missing his son. He can't communicate with his son. He thinks his wife's gone too, with the psychotic grandfather. My God! And I was rather astonished that. How Brian Bendis wrote that issue. But at the same time, I was simultaneously, paradoxically, kind of impressed, because I think Lois and Clark are as screwed up in their relationship as probably most people are today. So I was torn between being impressed with Bendis and wanting to give him a metaphorical slap. But well, how did you feel about the issue?
I'm not gonna lie. I hate Bendis' Superman. I hate it, man. I like Tom King. I bitched about Tom King's Batman, but there are moments that I certainly enjoy. I hate Bendis' Superman through and through, man. There's maybe been one good issue out of everything Superman he's ever written, and it was Man of Steel #1. And then after that, it just, Jesus. It's like Superman set himself on fire with his own heat vision. Let me put it this way. I would respect what he's doing by mixing up the Lois and Clark relationship if their marriage and their family dynamics had been around for a while. It's been 2 years. We've barely, and if you look at it in publication time, it's not great. Really. I mean, we haven't gotten a lot of time with the family, and you're already doing this shit. There's a reason people loved Tomasi's Superman, because we're getting new challenges for Clark, right? It's him being a father, and that's just something that he can't punch away. He can't blow it away. He can't do anything with it except face it head on. And sometimes he fails. This is the one thing Superman can fail at, is being a father. But this isn't about it anymore. This is about Lois now being a bad mom and a bad partner in a relationship. This is about Superman kind of being an idiot.
Okay, well, I tried doing this in my video last night, but I probably got a little bit too carried away. I'll try to give a little bit of pushback to it's possible, I think, possible to reconcile Bendis's run as being perhaps consistent with Tomasi's intention or Tomasi's run, insofar as this is about, I think, a lot of Lois's insecurities came out. And I think that Lois, even throughout Tomasi's run, she kept kind of a low profile. She was genuinely kind of like, she was just mom. She was less Lois Lane, the reporter. She was more Lois Lane, the mother of Jonathan Kent and good husband to Clark Kent. And what Bendis has wrote here is when Lois goes with John with Jor-El in space, she doesn't feel needed. She feels like a third wheel, and that John is exploring. They're both super powered, and she's not, and she felt like she was a liability, and she didn't want to hold him back. And so for that reason, she came back to Earth, and she doesn't feel needed. And there's a pretty. I thought it was a very beautifully drawn scene where she's questioning whether or not, I think, she needs Superman needs her or John needs her, and she's maybe feeling a little bit insecure. That's maybe the most favorable reading I can give it if I want to give Bendis the benefit of the doubt. I don't know if that's what he was trying to do, but I'll give him that, because I think that Lois Lane, that's what I got out of it, was her insecurity, and she was so insecure about it, and a little bit selfish, that she actually lied and basically never bothered to tell him when she came back. It's interesting that Superman never held her accountable. Like, he never once said to her, well, wait a minute, before we have sex, can we finish this conversation? I mean, he's a guy, right? I mean,
can I just say I love the title that you used for Action Comics, your review, man. If you guys are watching this and you haven't seen it, the title alone is just like enough to make you smile. It's literally I'm not going to spoil it because I want the shock value to be there, but it does resolve around what Boom's talking about here, the accountability of Lois. But continue on, my friend.
Well, no, I mean, this is the way relationships are. Now, I will, I've in my professional life, I have been a divorce lawyer for the last 22 years. So I know what dare I say, I'm familiar with failed relationships. I spend most of my time breaking people up. So they generally tend to tell me what works and what doesn't. Okay. Yeah. And I don't purport to be, I'm not an expert by any stretch, but I just make some observations. And I can tell you there's lots of ammunition here to see that Lois and Clark are on very, very shaky ground. And what I find interesting is they're not honest with each other. Clark is not being honest with his feelings to Lois. Lois is being deceptive to Clark. And yet at the end of the issue, they kiss, and they're in the clouds and they're kissing, and oh, don't let me go, honey. Oh, don't worry, I won't. Everything's so perfect. That's called denial. So right now what they're doing is that they're functioning in dysfunction. And I mean, just like any working relationship, I mean, that's where we're all at. And so I say that, and that's why I said in my review that it's an underhanded compliment to Bendis, because I don't want the relationship to be perfect. I think there has to be some drama there in order to make it interesting, right? I think just like with Selina and Batman, there has to be some drama there. Nobody wants perfection because that's boring. And so I got mixed. That's why I have mixed feelings about the issue, because there's some drama there that I like, and it touches upon relationship issues. It touches upon feminism. It touches upon, career women struggling to make a relationship work. And it also has the doormat boyfriend who doesn't stand up for himself. And of course, a woman using sex as a weapon.
If Bendis were trying to accomplish the same thing by different means, I'd say, yeah, for sure. I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid to read a story where Lois and Clark's relationship isn't 100% steady. But when we really haven't gotten a lot of the steady, really, how much impact does this have on us, right? Because like I said, we haven't gotten a hell of a lot of Lois and Clark and John together. It's been 2 years since, maybe 2.5 since John was even introduced to comic books. 2 years of them actually being a family. Let me put it this way, man. Brian Michael Bendis makes Lois seem like such a shit mom after what happened in Action Comics, right? So in the during the end of Dan Jurgens' time on Action Comics for Rebirth, they did a lot of groundbreaking stuff with Jor-El and how Jor-El he was a cog in the machine that was ultimately the plan of potentially Dr. Manhattan, right? Or whoever the hell is behind everything.
Yeah.
And he's kind of a maniac. All right, Lois, you're going to let your 10-year-old son go off with his maniac grandfather because you don't feel valued? Are you kidding me? What a terrible mom that is. Like Lois Lane is cunning and determined and a number of other things, and there are some things that I wouldn't put past Lois Lane, but being a shit mom, are you kidding me? Like, he's 10 years old and you're letting him go off with this maniacal, known to be murderous grandfather that you've met for all of maybe 20 minutes when he was trying to, God, Ra's al Ghul the world, essentially. Like, what? Here's the thing, man, I think this is why it means more. I wasn't a Superman fan going into Rebirth, right? But walking out of Tomasi and Gleason's run on Superman, I loved Superman. I grew to love Lois Lane. I grew to love Jonathan Kent. Bendis makes me hate Lois Lane. How's that for feminism? You're making me hate Lois Lane because she's a bad mom, because she's selfish. I think I think in the hands of a better writer, you could have accomplished kind of unearthing some unsteady ground on the Lois Lane Clark Kent relationship in a much better way. I think it's just demeaning to Lois Lane as a character.
I want to question you on your opinion of Lois Lane. I just wondered, Silver Batman Ranger says that Lois really has disappointed me as a mom character. Leonard Geschke says, I think it's absolutely terrible that they gave Bendis both super books. He says, I can't read this crap. And Sugar Cat says that her favorite Batman Superman crossovers were done by John Byrne in the 80s. Sometimes Wonder Woman made an appearance. I agree with you, Sugar Cat. I love the 80s. Carrying on with your question, my question to you about Lois Lane is, because you called her selfish, and I just want to give you some pushback on that. But I mean, she did encourage John to go with her grandfather. Granted, the grandfather maybe has mental issues, but Superman didn't object as well.
Well, Superman objected, but here, and I'm trust me, I'm not putting Superman at fault either. I think everything Bendis is doing kind of sucks. Okay. But largely, like, Superman objected, and he ultimately let it go, right?
Right.
So Lois, your husband's obviously not comfortable with this. You go off, you trick him into believing that you're going to go off and keep your son safe and have a watchful eye on him. And the next thing you know, shit, I got to finish my book. Bye, son. Yeah. I'll see you when the fuck ever. Like, it just, like, what mother would do that to their child? Really, really. I mean, like, like, Jor-El's not going to kill John, right? Like, that's pretty much a guarantee. Yeah. But, like, you're letting someone else raise your child in like some of the most formative years of his life and put him in danger and manipulate him. Like, you already know via an earlier arc in Tomasi Superman, which I doubt Bendis read, that there is an incredible potential inside of John that is far greater than Clark's. And you're going to leave that potential into a madman. And even, again, with that aside, from a paternal standpoint, you're going to leave your child with a maniac as your husband is off there saving the world because you want to write a fucking book. Like, I get it. There's a point to be made about insecurity and Lois feeling insecure with her relationship because she's married to Superman. I just do think this is the way to
Dark Knight. We got a question. Sugar Cat asks, how would you write Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman if you had complete control? Her comment was, Lois seems to have less nurturing qualities than other women. So you want to take a stab at that? Why don't we just focus on Superman right now? How would you write Superman? I'm assuming that you would probably be more consistent with Tomasi's version, but
Oh, 100%. I would make Lois kind of a hard-ass mom. Tough, like school of hard knocks, but like she loves her kid. And it's very obvious, and she'll go mama bear when she has to. But I think it would very much be like you're hitting the hard streets of Metropolis. You're going out there, you're doing your thing. You need to learn by experience. Kind of a hard ass, potentially a little bit I don't want to say unrealistic because none of this is real, but you understand what I'm saying? Like unrealistic expectations of your child, but like she loves her kid and she'd do anything for her kid. And that's where her and Clark should be having their disagreements on how to raise John. I think that they should both be great parents in two very different ways. That's how you create conflict in their relationship. Not because Lois is being a neglectful mom. Because I've grown to love Lois, right, through Peter Tomasi's run. And although she was largely a little bit subdued, I also grew to love her in Jurgen's Action Comics, right? That's where we got the hard-hitting Lois Lane who's independent and has a voice and has something she wants to say. Cool. If you want to incorporate that, do it. Just don't make Lois a shit mom. Like,
well, you know, it's interesting. One of the scenes that I couldn't help notice how the difference between Clark and Lois is Lois Lane in Action Comics 1004. Lois Lane sits down. She's having a serious talk with Clark, and she's just spent the last 3 weeks literally avoiding him. And she had to be caught. Superman had to find her, and he caught her. Otherwise, she'd still be acting in deception. She'd still be hiding out. But here she is. You know, she's been deceptive for so long. And Superman, you know, while he's talking to her, he says, "Just a minute." And he goes and he rescues a bunch of people, and he comes back in about 30 seconds. And he goes, and then he asks her, "Well, where were you?" And she goes, "Well, I was just about to comment about how normal our lives are." You know, as if she was trying to make a point that we don't have normal lives because he just flew off for 30 seconds and rescued a bunch of people. And yet what I got out of that scene was that Superman respected her enough to not only did he go and rescue and save a bunch of people's lives, but he came back within 30 seconds to complete the conversation. You know, which to me was a huge, when you juxtapose that against Lois's 3 weeks of complete hiding out, it really makes Lois look bad.
Oh yeah.
It really highlighted the insecurities and the failure of Lois. And you know, it's yeah, I would be curious to know. In fact, I'm gonna ask Sugarcat if and this other people in the chat what they think of Lois Lane's portrayal in Action Comics.
No, I'd call it a betrayal. I would certainly call it a betrayal.
That was my own slip. I'm creating bias in the way I phrased the question.
No, I mean, you know, and you bring up another good point. I had largely just ranted and gone off the hinges about her being a bad mom. She's also being a terrible spouse, right? Like Superman. And again, like, you know, there's bound to be someone who's going to be like, "Oh, you menaced, you're not, no one's perfect. No one can be Superman." I'm not asking you to be Superman. But Superman is doing his damnedest to both save the freaking world, be a good dad, and be a good husband. And the whole time he's like, he can't, like Lois Lane, do you freaking realize, I don't think I'm giving Lois Lane too much credit here and thinking that by being gone and not telling Clark, you're ultimately distracting him from doing what Superman does.
Yeah.
Like that's his biggest conflict, is his internal conflict in emotional turmoil and not being with his family.
Yeah.
Also, what I don't understand is how the hell did Superman not know?
Yeah.
Does he know? They've said on multiple occasions in recent continuity alone that Superman knows 3 heartbeats.
That's right.
John's and Bruce's. He knows their heartbeats.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that you make a good point, and that's exactly right. So it does seem a little bit hard to believe. It would almost suggest that Lois had to go out of her way to hide her own heartbeat from her husband in order to stay hidden for as long as she did. Although one could perhaps think that maybe Clark or Superman was distracted by all the other things going on in his life. Sugar Cat made a very good point. She goes, was Lois raised as well as Clark? Who had the better upbringing? I think that is, you know, in defense of Lois, I think Clark probably was perhaps raised in perhaps a more healthy lifestyle. That's not to excuse Lois, but I say that only to better understand Lois. I mean, she was raised by, I think, sort of her in a military-like life. Her father was, I don't know much about Lois Lane's mom, but I think her father was very hard ass.
Well, yeah.
And you know, I think they had very different parents, and maybe that has some impact in terms of how Lois approaches their relationship.
Well, you would think it would almost to be the other extreme, right? Like she rejected her father, she rejected her upbringing. So you would almost think that like any mistake she were to make being a parent and being a partner in a committed relationship would be to the opposite end of what she experienced, right? Her father had kind of showed that, or had been stiff, and it had shown some, you know, notion that he didn't care as much as he should have. There was no, you know, there was no safeness, right, in his paternity. Whereas like Lois is pretty much showing the same thing. She's an unstable mom who's selfish and has her own agenda to go by. She's doing the exact same thing her father did. But like based on what I've read from Lois, you would think that because she rejected him, that she would, if anything, become the other extreme, right? In trying so hard to not be for her son what her father was for her and her sister, she would go to great lengths to be anything but that, right? And for me, there's so much behind it that doesn't make sense. I literally have like a small list of issues on just the Superman title alone.
You really need to do your own video on this, Dark Knight, because it sounds like you got a lot of pent up issues when it comes to this stuff. And I want to be clear here. I don't just say that to make a cheap joke at your expense. You make a lot of very, very good points, and that's one of the reasons why I mean all your comments about Lois Lane I think are well made, but I'm going to suggest that another reason why you're very passionate about this, and I am too, but I'm a little bit more torn, is because I really do, I think it's reflective, and I'm just going to say it, but it's the social politics of this. It's the gender. You know, right now, men and women, we're more so than ever before, it seems, in this society, in this culture war that we're living in, we're also, you know, we men and women, we're struggling to understand each other. And, you know, times are changing for women in the workplace, for men. There's fewer and fewer families staying together. Divorce rates are very high. You know, how do you maintain that work and life balance? How do you find that middle ground? And so I put it this way, and this is why ultimately I'm still in there with Bendis, and that is, I think that Bendis had a very, very difficult thing to do. Imagine, how do you write a great story about Superman and Lois? And another thing too, and I want to give credit to Sugar Cat. She goes, she says, would anyone read a story where everything went okay? And she makes a very good point. I mean, who would? I mean, there has to be some drama in their life. And, you know, Lois Lane, I think she's a card-carrying feminist. You know, God bless her. That's who she was. And she goes from being a Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter with her name up in lights, with working at the Daily Planet, to being basically fired, to basically writing a book, to basically having a child for like 10 years. I think, how old is John? 10? Or is he 13 now? He's 10. He's 10, sorry. So for 10 years, I don't know, you know, for a good portion of that, I don't know how long out of those 10 years did they live on a farm? I don't know. I don't really know in Rebirth continuity, how many years they actually lived on the farm versus the city of Metropolis. But it had to have been an adjustment for Lois. And so, you know, it's I just don't know. That's part of the thing that I'm struggling with, is maybe if we had a little bit more backstory with Lois in terms of the transition, like, because I'll say this, and this is a criticism of Tomasi. I'll give you some pushback on Tomasi. Tomasi never really let us get into Lois Lane's head.
Okay. No,
we never really did. We got a lot of what I loved about Tomasi, and dare I suggest, I don't want to put words in your mouth. You can give me pushback on this.
Yeah.
I think that most people love Tomasi for similar reasons why I did, and that is I love the father-son dynamic.
Agreed.
Lois was an afterthought. Quite
Agreed.
frankly, Lois was the traditional mom, which I like, because guess what? I got a traditional stay-at-home wife too. I'm a traditional conservative guy. So that's my bias. That's what I like. I was raised that way, and I'm fortunate to have what I want in my life. That's my bias. And so when I'm reading Tomasi, he had the dream, He had a powerful guy, good job with a beautiful wife. The wife stayed at home, and you had your kids. But we never really got into Lois Lane's head,
Let me also like frame what's going on here. I don't think like what Bendis is trying to accomplish ultimately is anything negative, right? There's nothing wrong with a little bit of pushback in the relationship between Lois Lane and Clark Kent. It's the way he's doing it. It's almost the same problem that I have with Tom King's Batman, right? I've said on many occasions, he oftentimes has a great message or a great point to make about the character Batman, but he sacrifices a lot to make that point known. And I think even in Tom King's like his lower quality outings in trying to pursue that is still better than what Bendis is doing here, right? For example, what happens in the church, right? Before the wedding, you're taking a glimpse at Batman's unbridled humanity, right? He wants to save the Joker and he'll do anything to save him. But like ultimately you make Batman look stupid. You make this one of the smartest men in the DC universe look stupid.
Right.
And I think what Bendis is doing here with Lois is worse. You're trying to accomplish this thing, right? In that Lois being a very strong, independent woman is being a little bit subdued by her relationship with Superman, right? She's married to Superman. I can't fault her for feeling that way. He is literally the man among men. He is a god amongst the people. I don't blame you for that. But the way that you're going about setting that precedent for Lois Lane is very poor. I think it sacrifices way too much. It sacrifices a lot of great qualities about Lois Lane. And again, I will argue with, because, Sugar Cat in the chat has raised a lot of really great points. For me, that relationship, if you want to create controversy, it's that they both have two very different styles of parenting John that are great in their own ways, but conflict with one another. That's where the argument should be generated from, for the most part. You know what I mean? That should be it. For me, it just makes Lois look like a neglectful mom. You can make Lois a hard-ass mom. That's fine. Do what you got to do. But a bad mom, I think, is demeaning to the character. And I think it also demeans what Dan Jurgens did with Lois Lane in action, right? Ultimately, Lois Lane wanted to get her voice out there, but she wasn't doing it at the cost of her family. Family was still number one for her in Action Comics. Yeah. Like, that's an issue. I think that we've talked a lot about like the Action Comics side of Superman. Would you be good with going into like the Superman title?
Oh, certainly. Yeah, go ahead. Start us off. What's going on in Superman?
Let me preface this in saying that I went to a pretty large comic book Facebook group, and I said something along the lines of Bendis's work on the Superman title is bad. Debate it with me. And there was maybe one person who tried to debate it with me, and I literally gave him a laundry list, and there was no more retort. It's been 2 days. I'm getting a report. Superman, the title is riddled with plot holes. There's a lot of nonsensical dialogue. Bendis doesn't understand the characters, and yet he's trying to integrate characters for the sake of integrating characters, even though they're not the ones that we know and love, right? So let me start by coming at you with a couple questions.
Yeah.
Right? Because you seem, I like our dynamic here because you're giving me pushback on things that I think have no room to be pushed back.
Okay.
And I love it. I really do. So my first question is from the beginning of the arc.
Yeah.
Why is Superman searching for Lois and John at the beginning of the book when he willingly let them go out there?
Well, Well, okay, there's an answer for that. Rogol destroyed his communication device. So yeah, when the only way that Superman had to communicate with Lois and John was through a communication device that was in the fortress, and the Fortress of Solitude was destroyed. And so Superman lost his way to communicate with Lois and John when they, yeah, he lost his communication device. So that's why he flew all the way to Titan looking for them, because he would have no way of communicating with them on at least a every second day basis or on a weekly basis. That's why he was so concerned about it. Because he missed them. And I think that,
right.
Well, I mean, that's the answer to that. That might not be a satisfying answer.
Well, no. So the reason I raised that question is, and it's going to go back to something I said earlier, that was ultimately a feint. We've established that he's actively looking for Lois and John, right?
Yes.
Why couldn't he find Lois? She was on Earth. He couldn't hear her heartbeat.
Well, he never, I guess. Well, I think the answer to that, and again, you might not like the answer, is, but I'm reminded of an issue with the Punisher, Frank Castle, where he's hiding from his enemies, literally in the same bar where three of his enemies are having a beer, and hiding in plain sight works. And I mean, why would Superman think of looking for Lois on Earth? He thinks that she's in the deep recesses of space. So, I mean, I think the answer is as simple as that. And I know that you can look, I'll grant you that he's Superman, but
yeah, my retort to that is literally that he's Superman. You would think that if Superman were looking for Lois and John, there would be, you think there'd be no overlap between where he's looking and like finding her on Earth. Again, his heartbeat, he's keyed into her heartbeat.
Well,
right?
No, fair enough. Well, first of all, sound doesn't travel in space. That's the first thing. It does travel on Earth, but again, you got to be, just because, I mean, I might have really good hearing, but it's just like if I was playing music in the background, if I focused on the music in the background behind me and not your voice, I wouldn't hear a word you're saying, even though you're speaking loud enough.
I would also argue with that, though. Bendis actually, and this is another one of my issues with Bendis' Superman, right? He kind of uses the framework of Superman's super senses to emphasize his humanity and condemn his godhood, and how he's able to pick out sounds. If he's able to pick out those sounds, why can't he? He's not. So you're saying he's not in his attempt to traverse the galaxy for Lois and John. You're telling me he's not even thinking, okay, let me try to key into their heartbeat. Let me try to key into their specific pheromones, right? Something along those lines.
Well, I guess I think, and again, I don't think any of these answers will satisfy you, because you can certainly choose to focus on that. I would just say this, that I don't think that Superman actually thought that John or Lois was actually in any danger, because he knew that they were with his grandfather, but he wanted to at least catch them, up to them, to at least probably give them a communication device and to know where they were, because he's a concerned father. But it wasn't something where it was an emergency situation and he was just being a worrisome father. Plus, we also have to factor in the fact that he's got other adventures going on in the DC universe. I mean, he's a very busy guy. He is Superman. So, I mean, I think that's the answer to that. Now, like I said, this isn't a hill I'm going to die on here. I mean, it's, yeah. I mean, it's, you know what I mean? I don't, I just, all I can say is that question, it's in and of itself doesn't bother me so much, other than the fact that if, I will grant you that, you would think that intuitively he probably, if he's at home at night and he's sleeping and he's getting his dream time, that I would think that, like you said, if he is tuned into Lois's heartbeat, you would think that maybe he would just suddenly wake up and know Lois is on Earth, if in fact his power level is as high as Bendis has suggested that it is. So,
well, I mean, even in Metal, like he says that he hears three people's heartbeat. Like he doesn't really have to even focus on it. He just hears it. Like he can just pick it out. And that's the big thing. It's just Bendis has done a lot of things in his Superman run, and it's literally just because. His reasoning is just because. Why doesn't Superman, like, why isn't he pursuing the obvious? Oh, just because. Just because. You want to know why? Just because.
Yeah.
And like, there's like whatever he's trying to do that's like deep and literary with the character is so overdone, right? Like I talk about how he repeats his emphasis on Superman's like super senses, right? In order to condemn his godhood and bring him back to humanity. He did that really well in Man of Steel. And ultimately he's kind of falling into a narrative trap that Tom King falls into, not in the sense that they're doing the same exact thing, but like, for example, in Heroes in Crisis, you get those 9-page grids of each of the sanctuary inmates pretty much going through the exact same process. There's no difference. What's going on here is outlined time and time and time and time again, and it's getting old, right? Like I get it. Some writers have things that are very characteristic to what they do, but there's a difference about finding a way to tastefully implement these things and doing it over and over again. That's something I found. One of my biggest issues is Bendis doesn't understand a goddamn character other than Clark Kent.
Yeah. Well, I'll grant you that, and and I wish I could probably show it. To those people watching, Dark Knight in a direct message chat, he forwarded me what he believes to be the worst page in Superman, in Bendis' Superman run, and in terms of dialogue, and it's when Batman is getting sick and he's talking to the Flash, who is being propped up by Superman, and yeah, the dialogue is pretty. It doesn't set. It's very hit and miss on the dialogue. So Bendis, I will absolutely grant you that Bendis is still struggling with dialogue. I do think it's baby steps. I do think he's gradually getting better. Although he did have Lois call Clark baby. I don't recall Lois ever calling Clark baby in Tomasi's run, and so I think there should be some narrative consistency in verbal mannerisms, in verbal clicks, or whatever the word is I'm looking for, and sort of linguistic similarity between expressions, between, if you've just read Tomasi's run, maybe Tomasi had Lois say baby and I didn't notice it, but it to me it really stood out in Action Comics 1004. But
see, I don't even have a problem with that, and like I'm the guy that's like sitting here picking things out. That's incredibly negligible compared to like what I'm looking at here. When it comes to the Justice League characters, this dude has never, like, it looks like he's never read a goddamn book with these characters in it when he's writing. Like, I have an 11-year-old nephew that could write better Justice League dialogue than this. Is like bad. This isn't just like a professor character. It is bad. It's just bad dialogue. Like, no self-respecting adult would say some of the things that these characters are saying. He's obsessed with proving the fact that he knows the DCU, right? Like, we get this council of leaders and beings across the universe, and it's just like one's from Tamaran, one's a guardian of Oa, one is, this, that, and the other freaking thing. But like at the same time, you implement all these characters and you prove very clearly you don't know a thing about any of them. You're like, oh, well, Ray Adam can shrink. I am a scholar of the DC universe. Where's my degree? Like, like Batman speaks outlandishly, right? And like when the spoilers, when the Earth is enveloped in the Phantom Zone, why are Batman and the Flash the only ones sick? You see Superman saving a shit ton of people. They're all fine. They're fine. But Batman and Flash are sick.
Well, okay. Well, I will give you a little bit of pushback there. There's at least one page where it shows people going into an emergency hospital, and it does say that it does actually, in the narration boxes, does reference the fact that other people, that people are getting sick and that they're ill affected by it. But I'll grant you that the way that it was written and the way that it came across, you're not the only person that made that observation about only Batman and the Flash being sick. Although, in fairness, if you look at the art and everything else, it wasn't. You could infer that it was more than that.
It feels weak. Like that connection.
No, it is. Well, let me tell you why. See, you're focusing on the trees, right? And when I look at The Forest, like the overall story, it's still working for me because I still think it's going somewhere. I really, really like Rogolzar. I don't think he's a one-dimensional hero. I think there's a lot more to him. I think he's got some complexity underneath this. There has to be something that's driving him. We don't know what it is yet. I really like the standoff between Superman and Rogolzar when they're in the Phantom Zone. Superman's there defending the Earth, and and they're staring at each other in the void. And Rogolzar has got Jazzer, the Kryptonian super criminal, on his side, and he's manipulated Jazzer. And then they have that attack. It's and beautifully illustrated. I love that scene where Superman is talking to Jazzer and says, you're being used. Rogolzar is using you, and Jazzer says you're lying, and Superman reminds him, I never lie. And I thought that was a really well played scene, and because in one line, Superman reminded a super criminal that I'm Superman, I don't lie. Even you will admit I don't lie. And Jazzer gets out of the battle. So, hearing your criticisms, Dark Knight, I'll say this. It sounds a lot like, I think we're seeing a lot of similarities in many ways to, as you alluded to earlier, with Tom King. At least for me, maybe you're more harsh on Batman, on Bendis than maybe Tom King, but I'm more critical of Tom King than I am of Bendis, because I think Tom King screws up the bigger things, and Bendis screws up the little things. I think Bendis gets the big things right so far, and I think he's got so it's a little bit, it's we're just sort of we're sort of on opposite ends, or in terms of where we're hanging our hat and what seems to annoy us more. But there's definitely some faults I find with Bendis, but overall, it's still working for me, and I still love the Circle. There's still lots of secrets to come. And the thing is, my ongoing criticism of Bendis is I just wish he would get a little bit more out there, because, for example, we're going to be getting John Kent. John is going to be coming back with Jor-El. I don't like how he's structuring this, how he's breaking things up so much. That we should be getting hints of what's happening in John's life. He should be better at sort of structure. He should be eliminating some pages of dialogue and giving us more vignettes of all the players in the Superman universe, so that we have a better understanding of the larger picture.
I just, you make a fair argument about like Tom King messing up the big things and Bendis messing up the small things. In my opinion, I think Bendis literally messes up almost everything. I find very little things. I find very little redeeming to Bendis writing Superman besides what he's doing with Superman, like as a character. I think he generally has a good idea of like who Superman is, who Clark Kent is, how they respond in certain situations, and that's great, right? Like that's definitely a huge part. But like everything else, dude, just sucks. and it pains me because like Ivan Reis's art is beautiful. Getting to see that is great, and I wish like under the hands of a better writer, it'd be amazing. But like the characters, he understands literally none of them, right? Like Batman speaks so outlandishly. Just as an example, like it's weird because too, when you see characters like the Justice League talking to each other, it's almost like they're in the room talking about separate things because Bendis has to address everything going on, and none of it's like he's not even writing cohesive conversations.
Yeah,
that's not even like high level concepts of writing or characterization. These people in a room that are talking to each other aren't actually holding the same conversation.
Yeah. The last time that I've seen this many people criticize the writing of the members of the Justice League was Brian Hitch's Justice League. Brian Hitch also struggled with dialogue when he was writing Justice League, and he was highly criticized for that, and I think rightly so. Brian Hitch is a great artist, but I think he's still learning the trade a little bit on the writing. he didn't always get the voices right for the Justice League. And actually, I even think Christopher Priest struggled a little bit with his Justice League arc, if I'm brutally honest. But no, I definitely got. I can't. It's hard for me to fully defend Bendis's dialogue, other than to say I'm absolutely stunned. I'm really surprised that some of his dialogue was that cringeworthy for Justice League. I didn't think it would be that difficult because he's so good. He's so good with Marvel. Like, he's fairly good with the dialogue over in Marvel. If anything, he was too wordy. He was so familiar with all the characters in the Marvel universe. I didn't think that he would be this far. You know, he really doesn't seem to have a handle on members of the Justice League. But well,
one of the things I don't get right now, man, like, nobody fucking understands Barry Allen in the DC universe right now. Like, Scott Snyder writes him as someone who's young and doesn't understand his powers or understand his place in the world. Bendis literally, I think, like, I had written a small note. Flash is a literal idiot and obsessed with bowel movement. A child that really, really wants to be a part of the party. Like,
that's Impulse, isn't it?
He's literally like, no, Jeff Johns wrote Impulse better than Bendis is writing Bart, and this isn't like in a quality sense. This is in like who's mature. Literally, ready? Issue 2 of Superman. They're inside the new Fortress of Solitude. Barry, well, I didn't get the new Fortress housewarming party invite. I just ran all the way from Antarctica because you told me to. I'm freezing. I have to pee now. What the hell is Bendis's obsession with the Flash and bowel movements and going to the bathroom? Like, for those of you that aren't reading Superman, he consistently talks about taking a shit. Like, from Man of Steel on. What? Yeah. He's a grown man.
Yeah, you know, it's funny because Barry Allen is, in my view, was always uptight. He's always uptight.
Exactly.
He's got a bug. He's got a stick up his ass, and he's always overly polite. He's more polite, as a matter of fact, he's more polite than Clark Kent is, quite frankly. He's always got a bug up his ass. He's like Mr. Perfect. He's really Mr. Polite. That's why Iris Allen fell in love with him. He's picture perfect, but he's too overly nice. And whereas Wally West is a little bit more loosey-goose, but Impulse is the one where it would be farting and talking about bowel movements. Bart Allen would be the one more like that.
And not even Bart Allen would do it to the same extent that's going on here with Barry Allen. Literally, ready? Same page. Yeah. Flash is like looking around the Fortress of Solitude with like this childish amazement. It looks too small to push an entire planet through. Superman. Yes. Barry. See how I figured that out? Because I'm a scientist.
Yeah, I know. That's not Barry Allen. That's not something that Barry Allen would. He wouldn't talk that way.
Like, not only is it not Barry Allen, it's not an adult. I couldn't tell you a single adult character in the DC unit, like not even Plastic Man, would talk like that. Like,
well, even the guys. It's funny. I don't know if you've ever listened to the podcast from the guys at Weird Science DC. They make fun of They make fun of Keith Giffen's dialogue, because you can make fun of his, and also Brian Bendis's dialogue. And, it's sort of like the dialogue that goes like this. Oh, my God, I just ran a long way. I got to go to the bathroom. The bathroom? Yeah, the bathroom. Where's the bathroom? The bathroom's over there. You mean over there? There? Yeah, there. And it goes, and it's like goes through 7 different panels. That's Bendis in his extreme. If you go into his old alias, like, I mean, that's literally how the dialogue is. You'll have page after page after page of talking heads. Really? Yeah, really. Why? What are you into? Why? Okay. Yeah. Whatever you say. And to be honest with you, if I'm brutally honest, I think that if Tom King is not careful, Tom King borders on that kind of dialogue at times with his 9-panel grids. And he even, as much as I enjoy his Mr. Miracle, it's ending now. It's going to be going into issue 12. I think that with I hope he doesn't get that way with Heroes in Crisis, but I mean, he with certainly in various issues of Batman, sometimes his dialogue can get a little bit,
Listen,
a little bit of loosey goosey too. But anyway,
you know, Boom, you know this, and I know there's like at least two people in the chat that know this of me. I'm very critical of dialogue. And I hate Tom King's Batman dialogue, and I would put it leaps and bounds above what Bendis is doing in Superman.
Yeah.
And that's saying, like, this is bad. Not only is this not understanding a character, this is just genuinely terrible dialogue. On the next page, right, like I was trying to find a good example of how poorly he writes Batman, too.
Yeah.
Ready? Superman. This is Batman. Cool. Superman doesn't know your voice or anything. I feel mild discomfort in my chest and bowels. Really?
Batman would say that?
Really? It's so bad. Like this, here's the thing that I can't like enunciate enough. Not only is this just not understanding a character, this is like a first grader writing a short story.
Yeah.
This, like, excuse my French, but like the dialogue just plain fucking sucks. Like, and this gets past editorial. That's what I'm talking. Like, editorial's giving Bendis like all this free room because he's Bendis. But ironically, Bendis is writing some of the worst shit I've read in comics in years.
But I think the problem though is that I'm not even sure that this is something that editorial can fix. I mean, it's dialogue. It's not like, unless he's misspelling a word. I mean, that's the voice he's giving the characters. So, I mean, editorial. I mean, short of basically insulting him and saying, this is not the voice of the character. Well, it is to Bendis, and that's his interpretation. So,
they've stepped in when it comes to like whether or not they think that a narrative, is the right, or whether a particular narrative is the right pursuit for a character. But you can't straight up say no self-respecting adult would say this sentence. Like, this isn't even understanding the character. A self-respecting adult wouldn't say some of this stuff. If this came out of a Teen Titans book, it would still, like, none of them would even say this. Like, he just doesn't get it. Every single one of these characters, like Martian Manhunter, we've talked about, right? Like, he pretty much tries to convince Superman to go like injustice dictator Superman, and some people are like, well, maybe it's a shapeshifter. They've kind of alluded to the fact that it's probably not a shapeshifter, because he's still communicating with that same Martian Manhunter and the whole Justice League, which means that whoever this is, and assumedly it is Martian Manhunter, not a shapeshifter, has that same established mental link with the rest of the Justice League.
Yeah.
So that was Martian Manhunter, right?
Yeah.
That pretty much told Superman that, like, you can be a leader. They need you. They need your strength. Sometimes you just gotta, like, give them the iron fist. Like,
well,
okay, so Martian Manhunter is now a psychopathic fascist.
Well, I think that's maybe reading a little bit much into that one conversation. That, I mean, I know a conversation you're referring to, and Martian Manhunter basically was strongly pushing Superman to be more proactive and getting Superman to explore the at least contemplate the notion of being more proactive on Earth. In other words, being more forceful with the nations and being more forceful with all the countries in terms of doing things a certain way. And I'm not really sure. I don't know. He made Superman think. I was curious when Bendis did that too, because I was wondering if maybe we were going to have Martian Manhunter become a villain or something, because it seemed to be a little bit odd thing for John Jones to say. It didn't sound like something that like John Jones, Martian Manhunter, would not say something like that. Well, I felt that was a little out of character for John Jones.
And that's why we've talked about how we were both skeptical. I'm sorry to interrupt, but like, we've discussed how we were both skeptical of that. I was like, is this a shapeshifter? Yeah. Is somebody manipulate? Like, well, it's definitely not a shapeshifter now, because his mental link with the Justice League's already been established. Like, it's already there.
Yeah.
And there's no way a shapeshifter would be able to trick that into existence, unless they're just because Bendis, which is very possible, which is equally as bad.
Okay. Well, it's let's make a final point about Superman, and then let's get on to Wonder Woman. So for our last half hour here.
Okay. So like anything to get out of Superman, don't buy it. Like I wouldn't waste your money on it. I mean, the dialogue's juvenile. He doesn't understand the characters. Besides maybe Superman, the puns are stupid and childish. How is the narrative has so many freaking plot holes? How did they get into the Phantom Zone? Because Starlab is doing experiments. Cool. You just said Superman's the only one with access to a Phantom Zone projector. How are they doing this? Because how did it just so happen that they're doing this experiment when Rogol Zaar's trapped in the Phantom Zone? Because the narrative just needs it to happen. There's so many issues, like with everything he's doing in Superman besides maybe the character of Superman. Cool. You've proven to us that you've read some Mark Waid, some John Burns Superman. Awesome. Good for you, Bendis. But you don't know diddly shit about anybody else. Like some of these mistakes that he's making are not only inexperienced with characters, they look like an inexperienced writer.
Well, my final point on Superman is I continue to remain hopeful that this is going somewhere, and I will be the first. I hope I don't do this, but I will be the first to eat my words. And if I am wrong and this goes nowhere, I will be very disappointed, and we'll find out on a future live stream, I'm sure, if that's the case. But I remain hopeful. I choose to believe that Bendis, I do see slight improvements in his dialogue from issue to issue. This is not something that happens from panel to panel. His worst dialogue is with the members of the Justice League, with the new characters he's created in Action Comics, the Firewoman character, Miss Melanie Moore, I think her name is, and then Miss Osgood. Yeah. They're pretty good characters. And I think that this Red Mist character, I think, is a great villain. I love the idea of the underground mafia in Metropolis, how it's very different, how they got to act and do their crimes differently than in Gotham City because they're dealing with Superman. I thought that's very inspired. I think that's very interesting. Hasn't really been done before that I can recall. So I think it's worth checking out for that. But it's a long story. This is a decompressed tale. And I generally don't like decompression, but I'm sticking with it because it's Superman. So, I'll leave it up to people to make their own choices. Having said that, we got one member of the Trinity left, Dark Knight, and I'll start off talking about Wonder Woman. In the Wonder Woman right now, I think finally I'm more interested in Wonder Woman now than I have been in a long time. Thanks Agreed. In large part to James Tynion IV. You and I have been very, very vocal in our support and our praise for James Tynion IV. As a matter of fact, I mean, having come off criticizing Tom King and Bendis, and now we're talking about, James Tynion IV. He nails the dialogue, he nails the story, the plot points, and really Justice League Dark, and going into this Witching Hour weekly series that ends, it's all every week in October. It ends on Halloween, which really focuses in large part on Justice League Dark, but in particular Wonder Woman and the state of magic in the DC universe, and in particular the exploration of Wonder Woman as a vessel for Hecate, or Hecate, however you want to pronounce it, a vessel for this darker magics. I particularly like the current issue of Wonder Woman, which came out today, and I'll show it here. It's issue 57. It's chapter 4 of the Witching Hour. It's really good, really good. There's different vessels where Hecate stored her magic in, and Wonder Woman ultimately ends up in this issue. Manitou Dawn and Black Orchid end up being incapacitated. John Constantine performs an exorcism, strips them of Hecate's power. Unfortunately for Wonder Woman, Wonder Woman now has 3/5 of Hecate's power in her, and she might in fact be dead by the end of this issue. We don't know, but it's exciting stuff. It's good. There's drama. It's well written. It's fun to read. Dark Knight, give me your take.
I'm really glad we can talk about something positive because I've been an asshole this whole conversation. I really, really like what's going on with Wonder Woman. And I never thought in a million years I would say that I like what's going on with Wonder Woman right now more than my favorite character, Batman, and Superman, who I've grown to love over the last 2 years. I followed Rucka's run in Rebirth. I picked up James Robinson's run, but read it kind of sparingly. I kind of liked the idea of the overarching narrative, didn't love the way it was executed. I dropped it for the brief Steve Orlando arc because Steve Orlando, and I'm not getting into that. But now that Tynion is doing what he's doing with her in Justice League Dark and then like the 2 issues of Wonder Woman that he's writing, man, this guy just fucking understands pretty much every character he writes, man. James Tynion is a fan of the comic books, and it shows. Like you said, I don't want to reiterate too far, but he understands the dialogue. He understands the characters. He understands the interactions. He writes damn good stories that are relevant to the characters and that are revealing of them in so many different ways. And he finds a good way to balance it throughout Wonder Woman and Justice League Dark. In particular, I love how fresh everything he's doing right now with Wonder Woman is. It's so fresh and different and new, right? How often do we get to deal with the magical side of Wonder Woman? It's always either the warrior, the princess, the god, or some combination of those 3, but never the magic, right? And we know it exists. Hecate is not like something that has been absent from Wonder Woman's mythos or the mythos of the DC universe as a whole, but we're getting to see that intermingling between this, right? And it's awesome. I like Justice League Dark is one of my favorite books coming out right now.
And I think just go ahead. Sorry. No,
I never thought I'd be saying that. Like Justice League Dark is probably like one of my top 3 books coming out right now as like an ongoing series. I fucking love it.
Well, let me tell you something. I share your initial cynicism about books based on magic. I've never really been a fan of books on mythology or magic-based superheroes. I've never really been a fan. Now, that doesn't mean I can't enjoy a great story, and there can be great, I love mythology, can be very interesting, but I just find that more often than not, I found Wonder Woman's the most disappointing stories. I think Wonder Woman is drowned in mythology. Every character and every writer that writes Wonder Woman does the same old tried and true plot points. It's a trope, it's Ares, it's Amazon, it's Themyscira being destroyed. They go through the same tropes again and again. And so when Justice League Dark came out, I was very cynical. I wasn't a big fan of Justice League Dark in the New 52. I didn't think it worked all that well. It was okay, but it was just sort of like meh. But I was like I say, I'm very, very impressed. I really like what Scott Snyder is doing in combination with James Tynion. In Justice League, you can tell they're moving toward distinguishing between divinity and magic as part of the 7 forces coming out of the source wall from the totality. I love the philosophical discussions. I like the questions it's raising. Well, what's the difference between divinity and magic and science? Like, what's the connections there? And what I really like about Justice League Dark is that it's a really great eclectic group of superheroes. You got the Swamp Thing with the Parliament of the Trees. You got John Constantine, who's sort of like an exorcist. You got Zatanna, who's like probably a magical warrior, best there is. And then Wonder Woman is this demigod who has a connection to, she's got a magic lasso, and yet she's connected to the divine, being the Greek god. So Wonder Woman is a little bit of both. And then you got even Bibbo, the detective chimp with the magic sword and a patron of an Oblivion bar that has the back door into the Hall of Justice. I mean, this is just so many fantastic ideas, wonderful ideas that you wonder why they haven't thought of this stuff before, and just very, very impressive.
No, I mean, and even just singling out like what he's doing with Wonder Woman alone, I could go on for an hour talking about how great Justice League Dark is and how well Tynan is handling the team dynamic and not finding a way to overcrowd that dynamic and not finding a way to end up, you know, messing up his narrative. Yeah. But like just looking at Wonder Woman alone, he gets the character, right? Like he gets how she interacts with every single individual character in Justice League Dark, right? And finds a way to take this character and integrate a believable way for her to doubt herself, right? Like Wonder Woman is one of the most convicted characters. Maybe like convicted is the wrong word, but she is one of the most strong-willed characters in the DC universe. And to find a really authentic way to really kind of put a thorn in that is, I find, difficult, right? A lot of people do this really synthetic, unappealing, you know, narrative that attempts to do that poorly. But this makes sense, right? Like she was branded as a child. And these are powers even above and beyond her that she's trying to figure out. Not only is she trying to do that, she's trying to save the magical, you know, I don't want to say realms, but like the magical remnants of the DC universe.
Yeah.
So much going on here, and it all makes sense. It's just like, okay, like this, like I could see Wonder Woman doing this. It makes sense that she's involved. This makes sense that she's coordinating things this way, or this is how something affects her. And then like also it's Wonder Woman with pretty much like black Themyscirian magic. It's freaking cool. Like above all else, it's freaking cool, man.
Yeah, it really is. And what I love, I just like Wonder Woman needs. This sounds so cliche, but she needs to have more flaws, and frankly, I think Superman does too. But Wonder Woman needs more flaws, and this is I think this is the safest way to maybe explore some of her imperfections is by magically putting some darkness within her, so that there's a story excuse for it and say, well, she's possessed. I personally, my personal hope, and this isn't going to happen, but I wish. My hope would be that a portion of Hekete's dark magic remains permanently in Wonder Woman in order to give her some character flaws to exert once in a while and have her struggle with it. Because I think one of the high points of the New 52 was when Wonder Woman became a god of war. Not only was she Wonder Woman, but she was also the goddess of war after killing Ares. And that gave her an edge that challenged her psyche, and it made her more interesting. And I think that if she was to always have a portion of Hekete's magical or dark magic within her, I think that would make her a little bit more interesting as a character and allow us to explore her darker side, juxtaposed against her, you know, her preachiness and her perfection all the time. And I think it's needed. Personally, because that's my bias, because right now I think she uses the magic lasso too damn much. I think she supplicates herself too much. I think she's too drowned in Greek mythology. I like the idea that she's going to be, you know, I like what dark magic introduces to her. It forces her to compromise. It forces her to change her tactics. It forces her to it rocks her mythology a little bit, and it makes her question herself. And frankly, that's what she needs, and I think that's what the readership needs too. And I think James Tynion IV is proving that.
No, I'm going to ride your coattails all the way to the bank, my friend. I think what you have to say is very, very valid. And what you were saying about, you know, the necessity for them to squeeze kind of the dark magic into being the reason for her and her newfound flaws, it makes a lot of sense. Because with characters like her and Superman, you've already established that they are what they are, right? If you were to suddenly have them on the drop of a dime be something totally different,
exactly,
It wouldn't make sense, right? It has to be forced upon them. It has to be something that is outside of their control. And that's what's happening here. Because Wonder Woman isn't doubting herself because suddenly she's not confident, right?
Yeah.
Wonder Woman is doubting herself because there are these forces from way beyond her control that are impacting her life, her situation, and ultimately the DC universe. That's the way to do it. That's the way to implement these type of character flaws, because Wonder Woman can't handle this the same way she's handled everything else. And like you were saying, it forces her to grow and adapt and change and acknowledge things that she might not be able to do either at all or on her own.
And the thing is too, I think that I think the mistake that writers make, or that DC makes with some of their established characters, and Marvel does it too, they have to be careful because what my buddy Spike Valentine always says, I mean, every writer that comes on, they're creators of folklore. They're just temporary. Every writer is a temporary custodian of these characters, and these characters are to be cherished. And so you got to be careful what you do with them. But I think that it's important. I think they can push the envelope with Wonder Woman. And I would put the question this way: who's to say that as you evolve as a character, you necessarily evolve into something better? Who's to say that the choices Wonder Woman makes tomorrow are better in terms of quality answers or choices that she made yesterday?
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, to me, make her make mistakes. I mean, Wonder Woman is always choosing to be, you know, do the right thing, always choosing to supplicate herself, choosing the way of the peaceful warrior. Well, maybe give her an adventure where, because of her influence with Hecate, she chooses a different path, maybe a little darker. It doesn't mean she has to kill anybody. It doesn't mean that she has to become this horrible person, but just give her a little bit of flaws. Like, that's all I'm saying.
You make perfect sense. And I think that it's really relevant, you know, for those of you, and I'm not going to give away spoilers. It's incredibly relevant to the 3rd season of Daredevil that just came out. Matt Murdock is changing and growing as a character. In this season, he makes a lot of decisions that he wouldn't have made before. Maybe they're not the right decisions.
Yeah.
You know,
I'm on episode 4 of season 3 of Daredevil.
So good. But like, and here's the thing, right? What they're doing with Matt Murdock, they're making him grow and they're making him learn because he's making mistakes. Right? That's how we grow. That's how characters change.
Yeah.
You're not always going to make the right decisions when you grow. Growth isn't defined by that. Growth is defined by reacting to your mistakes. And here, Matt Murdock, this isn't even a spoiler because it's been all throughout teasers. He's fully intent on killing Wilson Fisk. This whole season. There's no doubt about it. What happens on his journey to attempting to kill Wilson Fisk is what's going to define the character for the foreseeable future. And that's what it does. And in a very similar way, that's what's happening with Wonder Woman, or that's what should happen with Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
There have to be things out of her control that force her to make difficult decisions.
And I think we've sort of, I don't know if you and I did this intentionally, but I think we stumbled on a great direction for Wonder Woman that they ought to take her. And we say that with no ego, of course, but quite frankly, I wholeheartedly agree. Frankly, now with the Wonder Woman movie out and everything else, I think the corporate guys and girls at DC would probably refuse to let Wonder Woman snap Maxwell Lord's neck again like she did in 2006 or 2007. But that to me was inspired writing when Greg Rucka wrote that storyline. I absolutely love that she did what had to be done, and they never did really fully explore the ramifications of that. Right. And but I think that, I'm not saying they need, again, I'm not saying they need to make Wonder Woman kill, but I do think that they could challenge Wonder Woman, because imagine if somebody had to contain the darker magic of the universe. You know as well as I do that Wonder Woman would be the first person to sacrifice herself to be the vessel so that nobody else would have to pay that price. Wonder Woman would do that. And I think that would be a good through line into a new story arc for Wonder Woman. And, I personally would put on I would take Wonder Woman off Earth if I was writing Wonder Woman, and I would put her on an adventure in space, and I would link it to her being part of having some darker magics, and have her to go basically on a space adventure related to the darker magical forces, and just have her sort of go on. I would get her off Earth, and have more fun that way. Maybe even take a few members of Justice League Dark with her. I think that would be pretty cool, and move away from the mythology and maybe explore a little bit more of the darker magics, and get into some science and science fiction, and maybe even get into some Jedi-like or Sith-like, to use that analogy. I think it would be really epically cool.
Somebody's been reading Mark Waid's Doctor Strange.
Doctor Strange out. Well, not only that, I'm even throwing in bits of Black Panther, because I think that I think that the Amazons should have an Amazon race somewhere on another planet in the galaxy. I think the Amazons should have explored. Who's to say Amazons are just on Earth? Why can't they be elsewhere? There's so much potential for the Wonder Woman mythology that's not explored yet. When you think about all the complexities of feminism and women's studies, and how female issues are at the forefront of our culture and politics, when you think of how little has actually been done with Wonder Woman in comic books, it's a freaking tragedy. It really is.
I agree. I think too, one of the points that I wanted to comment on was you brought up Wonder Woman snapping Maxwell Lord's neck back in the OMAC Project event. For those of you that have read Greg Rucka's Wonder Woman, that he writes Wonder Woman is the ambassador of peace. Especially if you look back into his Rebirth run, that's really what it's cemented on, especially in the year one story arc at the beginning of Rebirth. It's her becoming the ambassador to peace. And if someone with that much care and with that much knowledge and with that much involvement in Wonder Woman's mythos is going to be the one to make her snap someone's neck, it's the same person. It means something, right? He's not doing this as shock value. He's doing this because he believes that this is fundamentally a way to make the character grow. Literally the ambassador of peace snaps someone's neck. You know why? Because it was really the only option. And even if it wasn't the only option, it was the quickest. It was the most guaranteed. It is the most foolproof option immediately. Wonder Woman had to act, and she did it. Was it the right thing to do? Probably. Does it have some consequences? Oh yeah, it did.
Yeah. No, I mean, and that involves Maxwell Lord is still alive. Is alive in the DC universe.
Yeah.
And imagine if Hecate, maybe possess Maxwell Lord. That's not going to happen, but I just see, I still think Maxwell Lord is potentially one of the best Wonder Woman villains out there. And Grant Morrison recently used him in his Earth 1 Volume 2 Wonder Woman. He never had his mind control powers, but he's a great character to use. And yeah, lots of potential there.
Yeah.
I want to wrap this up at 7:30, so we got 7 minutes left. Do you have any final comments about Wonder Woman?
I think I pretty much beat the nail on the head like I did with the other two members of the Trinity. What's going on right now with Wonder Woman's great. And for those of you that aren't reading, even if you don't, have a particular affinity to Wonder Woman, I would 100% suggest picking up Justice League Dark and what's going on there, and that leading into this little witching hour crossover event. It's fantastic. And there's a lot more even outside of Wonder Woman to be appreciated there. The artwork's great. The narrative is great. What they're doing with these characters is great. It's just a solid book. And again, not going too far from the whole Wonder Woman thing, the character is being done justice more than the other two members of the Trinity right now, as a whole.
And I also want to give a shout out to J. Willow Wilson. She begins her Wonder Woman run, I believe next issue 58.
Yeah.
And the reason why I want to give a shout out, because the potential plot line, it sounds really good. For those who don't know much about Wonder Woman, I can tell you that at the end of Greg Rucka's Rebirth Wonder Woman run, Ares is basically incarcerated. He's a willing captor, being trapped away on Paradise Island, basically in a tree-like prison, and he agrees to being in prison because he feels he's a bad influence on humanity. And at the end of James Robinson Wonder Woman run, Grail was trapped on Themyscira, and she now is also a prisoner with Ares. So Grail, who is Darkseid's daughter, is imprisoned with Ares, on Themyscira, and J. Willow Wilson's run is about the influence that Grail has on Ares. And apparently she influences Ares in such a way, and this is all in the solicitations, so none of this is really spoilers other than it's in the solicitations. Ares eventually apparently manages to find a way off Themyscira, and he wants to be Wonder Woman's new ally, and he appears to be helpful to Wonder Woman. How Grail plays into this, the type of influence she has on Ares, probably can't be good, but I'm really interested to see where G. Willow Wilson takes this. And
Agreed.
For those who don't know, G. Willow Wilson writes former writer of Miss Marvel. She wrote a Vertigo series called Air. It's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I know. I agree. I'm probably more excited right now out of Batman, Superman, Wonder Woman, their namesake titles. I'm most excited for Wonder Woman right now. And that's, I think it's even odd for me to hear say coming out of my mouth. Ending, I did want to ask, if you had to recommend concurrently one book for each one of these characters to read, right? Like that is concurrently coming out right now.
Yeah.
What do you recommend? I guess starting with Wonder Woman, maybe.
Well, honestly, if it's just one, I would actually recommend, because it's actually a self-contained story, I would recommend Earth 1 Volume 2 by Grant Morrison.
That's true. That's funny.
It's very entertaining. It's very good. It's entertaining. And Grant Morrison does a good job of encapsulating all the crazy, zany ideas of Wonder Woman, from the bondage to the Purian fanboy interest to the magic lasso to feminism to everything from transgender issues to everything, encapsulating it all. And he actually makes the story work. And you even have like the pickup artist in the form of Dr. Psycho. You got Maxwell Lord. You got the cynicism of the United States government. You got Nazis. I mean, literally, it's a fantastic book. I reviewed it. I actually got a lot of reviews. I only have 300 subscribers, but for the number of reviews I got reviewing that book, I think a lot of people picked it up as well, because I don't know why randomly people migrated toward that review video. But yeah, it's I would definitely recommend that.
Yeah, I mean, see, I would say G. Willow Wilson, but we haven't read any of her Wonder Woman yet. By default, I'm going to say Justice League Dark. Not only, it's kind of a 2-for-1. You're getting some great Wonder Woman, and you're getting a lot of other great things. I love what's going on with every single character that James Tynion is including. I have, my only problems with the book are very, very minute and very nitpicky, So if you guys want Wonder Woman, but you're also like, hey, like, let me get a little bit more bang for my buck, I'm going to say Justice League Dark out of all the books that she's involved in that are coming out right now.
The Witching Hour, basically the Witching Hour storyline.
Oh yeah, 100%. Just in general, just Justice League Dark's been great.
Well, we're at 7:20, about 2 minutes here. I'm gonna wrap things up. Dark Knight. I just want to thank. I want to thank Dark Knight. We're always taking turns being co-host. DarkKnightNation. Subscribe to his channel, guys. Dark Knight's a great guy. He does great reviews. He does great interviews as well with people like Jason Fabok and Robert Venditti. And he's got a 100 subscriber giveaway. So give him as many likes as you can. I'll let him talk about that. In the meantime, I'll just say hit the subscribe button for me. Check me out on Twitter at Metropolis40. I review a bunch of DC comic books. So does Dark Knight. That's all I got to say about myself. Dark Knight, you can take it away, or you can plug your channel if you like.
Oh, brother, first off, thanks as always for having me on, and burning the midnight oils, chatting comic books, man. It's always a good time. He knew I actually had to brew a coffee because I was so tired going into this and walking out of this conversation, getting so heated. I'm actually like wide awake. So I think that's an accolade to be put under the conversations that Comic Boom generates. So if you're not already, make sure you're subscribed to him. I guess in regards to me, my link's in the description. I talk a lot about comic books. I do, pretty almost always about comic books, but I also do some movies. I do reviews, like motion comics with audio and visual effects. I do interviews. I did some New York Comic Con coverage that I'm going to be following up on. And like Boom was saying, I currently have a 100 subscriber giveaway running. It ends. I guess it'll end at the end of tomorrow. There's a video. My most recent video is kind of you watch that to learn how to enter and win. Everything is put out there. But basically, the more likes that video gets, the more people I'm going to be able to give prizes out to. So go check that out. But you know, I appreciate you guys in the chat being just cool about me being an overly passionate nerd that likes to scream about things that don't exist. So thank you for that. And Boom, again, man, thank you for putting up with me for another week. It's always appreciated.
Pleasure's all mine, my friend. And so with that, I will sign off. It's Comic Boom out, and Dark Knight, say goodnight.
Have a good night, guys. Thanks for watching.